Can we hear one another at least?
I can hear you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Yep, I can hear you.
Kate?
I'm on as well. Carl here.
Sure. All right, good. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't alone.
We are waiting for Bill Janis to arrive. As soon as he gets here, we will begin. The live stream is, so if you speak, it can be heard.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Do we know where Mr. Janis is?
Last we heard, he was inbound in heavy traffic with a 1400 ETA.
Okay, thank you.
So I think Ernie is about to issue him a special report with a couple of weeks of confinement. Okay, let me just. Good. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your patience as we gather. Want to welcome everybody to this meeting, and probably the first board meeting ever hosted in the state of Florida, certainly that I know of. So changes in latitudes, and we welcome everybody here. The purpose of this meeting is to give the committee and the folks on the live stream an update on where we are in the search process, and specifically to talk about events going forward. I do want to note a couple of admin notes. We probably will have, although we don't yet, we probably will have some in-person guests here in Tampa. I know we certainly have folks from the live stream. Because of the nature of where we are in the process, any discussion that anyone wants to have about individual candidacies, we will do in closed session. So if that comes up, we will save that to the end and then go into closed session. With that, Jamie, I'm ready to dive into the meat of this. Anything you want to add before we start that?
Nope. Please proceed, Ernie.
Okay. So for everybody's benefit, I just want to recap where we have been over the last couple of months, and then where we're headed in terms of the process and the milestones. Obviously, the members of the committee know all this, having lived it, but for the benefit of the others, we formed the search committee and had our first introductory meeting by Zoom on March 20th. We retained the search firm of Bufkin Baker to help us with the search on March 28th. And just a note, Bufkin Baker is not on this call. They were invited, but we gave them the option. And because of the volume of applicants they need to screen, they felt like their time would be better spent doing that work, with which Jamie and I agreed. So I'll come back to that in a second. April 7th, though, we had our kickoff meeting with Bufkin Baker in Lexington. That was followed by the survey to the VMI community, which was completed on or around April 17th. Again, for everyone's benefit, there were nearly 1,500 responses to that survey, which, according to our Bufkin Baker colleagues, was the most robust response they've received for any kind of search of this nature. And I think that speaks well to the interest that the VMI community, alumni, faculty, staff, cadets, parents, have in this search and in its importance for the future of the Institute. We followed that survey on April 21st and 22nd with on-post feedback sessions with faculty, staff, and cadets. And I want to emphasize that we took great care to try and hit as many of the different on-post constituencies as we could. So that included staff at all levels, to include our classified staff. It included a couple different cadet groups. We had a couple of different faculty sessions. And so there was a lot of robust discussion that came with that. As a result of that, Buffkin Baker was able to put together the position profile, which is now posted to our website, and they have begun the screening process for individuals who might be interested in the position. One point that I'll make for everybody's benefit is that Jamie and I receive regular updates from Buffkin Baker on the how that process is proceeding, the screening of the candidates. And we will have our next update from them tomorrow. So the updates, the information I'll give on where we stand from the last Buffkin Baker update is current as of last Friday, June 6th. Obviously today, June 12th, we're getting together to just update everybody on where we are and where we're headed. And so when we talk about where we're headed, the next milestone event will be the assessment of the pool of the candidates, which we'll do in person in Richmond on July 15th. And from that assessment, we will select our candidates to be interviewed in the first round. That first round of interviews will take place July 29th and 30th outside of Dulles Airport. And then on a date to be determined, we will have our second and final round of interviews, which we expect to be on post. And as we get a little bit deeper into July, we can talk about how that scheduling might work and what the scheduling process for that set of final round interviews will look like. We have set the date of September 22nd, which is the first date of our regularly scheduled Board of Visitors meeting, as the no later than date for selection. We can move that date up if the process is moving in such a way that allows us to do that, but we are not going to go later than that, if at all possible. So why don't I pause there and ask for any questions on the schedule from members of the committee? Okay. Candidate pool update. So as I mentioned, Jamie and I have a regular update from Ken Carrick at Buffkin Baker to give us an idea on how they're progressing with assessing the candidates. And as you all will remember, there's a series of names that were submitted prior to Buffkin Baker being retained. There's another series of names that were listed by individuals responding to the survey. And then there's what they do in their own active recruiting based on their database of potential candidates. From all of this, they will then screen interview individuals and effectively pre-qualify them to go into the candidate pool for our assessment in mid-July. And again, that's where we're going to draw the first round of interviews. So quick numbers on that. And these are in general terms, but I think some of these numbers y'all have heard before. There were 38 names of either applications or nominations or expressions of interest prior to Buffkin Baker being retained. In the survey, there were another 168 separate names that were listed. And then on top of that, there's another 650 or so individuals that they are reaching out to with either just to see if either they're interested or they know somebody who they think would be a good fit for this role. They are actively screening all of those names as we speak. And the qualitative assessment they've put on it is they are very busy. They are scrambling, which they say is good. So far, the quality and the number of candidates they characterize as being very good. And so they are confident that we will have not only a robust pool, but some tough choices to make at every stage of the assessment interview process.
Question.
Go ahead.
The group of 600 or so, what's the source or the origin of that universe of names?
That's what Buffkin Baker has in their own database.
Okay.
What I don't have, and we sort of deliberately kept away from this, is how many people have landed in the candidate pool at this point. As we get deeper into June, we will start to flesh that out a little bit more. We have not, Jamie and I have not discussed individuals, one way or the other with Buffkin Baker. We want them to go ahead and do the pre-qual, and then we can take a look. We are getting both graduate and non-graduate interest. And one of the things that Jamie and I have worked out with Buffkin Baker is that between, say, the end of June and our mid-July assessment, we will look at the list of names of alumni who didn't make that first cut and see if there's anybody that we think ought to be advanced into that pool for consideration by the committee. So that is the update. Jamie, look to you. Is there anything else you want to add from the conversation we had with Ken?
Only one thing, we're going to talk with them tomorrow, but one of the things we're going to address with them is because of the number and the quality of the applicants that we have, we're going to look towards, can we move it to the left? So as soon as we get that figured out, we'll let y'all know. It would be, as we've said all the way along, we won't go faster than we need to. We'll go as slow as we need to make sure that we get the right person selected. But I believe that we may have the wherewithal to move it 3 weeks or so to the left. So we'll let you know as soon as we know.
That's exactly right.
So question to the chairman, does the process as it currently is envisioned, do we envision sort of doing it sequentially so that Buffkin and Baker sort of has to finish their assessment or vetting initially before they send us a group of names? Or is it possible for us to maybe do some rolling assessment of the names that have already been pre-cleared by them without making any final action on it?
I think that would probably, it wouldn't advance the ball any, and probably would be a lot more effort. I think what we're gonna do, I know what we're gonna do is much more of a sequential. They'll present us a pool in mid-July. And then from that, we will select the first round interviewees. And again, there's no magic to this number, but we're thinking in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 would be in the first round. And then 2 weeks later, we're interviewing them at Dulles. And then as Jamie indicated, initially we were looking around, okay, get the old core back, plus or minus Labor Day weekend, and then getting folks in. But as he pointed out, maybe we can compress that because that would otherwise be about a month between first and second round interviews, maybe even a little bit longer. If we can tighten that up, that's probably an inures to our benefit. And that's what we're looking at seeing how we can manage. Now, I'll go off script a little bit and say, if they're coming, let's say mid-August, we're for an on-post interview, then we don't have the old core back. We're in the midst of cadre. Maybe there's matriculation going on. So there's lots of different things happening, and it's not the usual order of business on post, but it's also not quiet. So there's some goodness there. And depending on who we have, maybe we are a little strategic about where people come in. So if they don't have a lot of familiarity, they get to see more of business as usual. Where if they have a lot of familiarity, maybe that's not as necessary. I'm not going to prejudge that outcome, but that's what we're looking at, is how we can potentially compress that gap so that we can move on to ultimately a final selection and shave some time off the schedule.
And the point in time when you and your co-chairman sort of take at least a look, a pass at the names that didn't make the cut would be when they close the field that they're going to propose to us. You'll go back and look at those that didn't make the vet. And make sure there isn't somebody that's on that list that probably should have at least been advanced for a second.
That's right.
Got it.
That's right. And
Thank you.
There may not be anybody, but that's sort of the fail-safe we're building into this.
Thank you.
Okay. Jamie, anything else you want to comment on?
No, we're good.
Okay. So the next order of business would then be the questions for the first round of interviews. And this is something that Jamie and I have already teed up with Buffkin Baker. And y'all will recall, we get consistently the same advice that the first round interview is much more productive if it's, to use Kim Carrick's illustration, if it's more of a dinner table conversation. So we certainly want to come in not necessarily armed with scripted questions, but with themes that we want to make sure we cover. And there may be a designated individual based on their background, what they bring to the committee, that would be the obvious person to tee up that theme if it doesn't flow organically in the conversation anyway. What I would ask, what Jamie and I would ask of everyone on the call here is take a look at the position description, take a look at particular concerns that each of the committee members bring to the table, and start thinking about the types of questions that you would want to ask around those particular themes. And then no pride of authorship, you can make it as multifaceted as you want, but send those into Jamie and me, and that can be the beginning fodder for us to start polishing those up. We'll get some additional support from Buffkin Baker, especially in the mid-July meeting, so that we can get those questions and themes in the way that we want them, and then be prepared when we meet with the first round candidates in mid-July, then be able to weave those into the interview. Again, each of these first round interviews is only going to be an hour only. That's a lot of time, and it's not a lot of time at the same time.
Yeah.
And so there will be probably more themes and questions that we'll get around having the chance to ask. So we'll probably also want to have some priorities and rank orders in there, but that's all something that as a committee we can come together on. But first we need to start drafting those out. So that's the homework assignment for everybody coming out of this meeting. And with that, I'll sort of open it up to questions. Jamie, if you want to lead off with anything else you want to add on that.
I don't have anything except, please get them to us sooner rather than later, just so we can start working at it. But no, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Questions from the rest of the team?
Yeah, I've got one, Ernie. Carl here.
Yes, sir.
You said we're going to select some themes, and then will questions cascade from those themes? And if that's the case, are you going to share those themes with us?
I think, yes, sir. I think the answer is yes. The questions will cascade from the themes, but I'm hoping that the members of the committee can tease out some of those on their own. So I'll give an example, just because Colonel Carrico is not on the phone because she's on overseas travel, but she's our faculty member on the committee. So one would expect that she would be asking about academic affairs from her perspective as the faculty member. Lloyd Tolliver, from an agency's perspective, might be asking about fundraising and how candidates envision that playing out, where they see priorities, et cetera. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't want those examples to restrict anybody to what they feel like ought to be themes or aspects of those that they want to ask. And so with your broad-based experience, I'd expect you to have a whole bunch. So feel free to cover as much of the waterfront as you'd like, and that goes for everybody else on the committee. You don't have to have ever been a D1 athlete to ask questions about D1 athletics. And obviously Jamal will probably be our voice box on that, but more heads are better than one. So that's the game plan here. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question. Yeah. You don't envision us asking the same set of questions to every single candidate in a sort of pedantic and mechanistic way, right? It should be more of an organic conversation, right?
Correct.
So follow on. Some of the candidates, I presume, that are going to be presented to us are not going to be alumni.
Right.
And so the nature.
Almost certainly.
Yeah, almost certainly. So the nature of the questions we're asking sometimes are going to be necessarily different if we're talking to someone who's a graduate versus someone who's not a graduate. Wouldn't you think?
I don't think so, but I think it's how the context in which we pose the questions.
Right.
And I'll go ahead and throw the rock back at the individual candidates. How they answer is going to be up to them, and whether we feel like that's an answer that sounds relevant or productive is going to be up to us to determine. But for example, I'll go back to athletics, and I know Jamal's living this in real time. You don't have to be a graduate to understand that NCAA athletics is a real exciting moment right now, or in a real exciting moment right now. So how that bears where a candidate, where he or she to be the superintendent, where that's going to play, and how that's going to be a factor in institute life, and what their vision is for all that. That's all fair game to ask, and I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of context around that, whether you're a VMI graduate or not. I mean, it is what it is. And probably the same thing from an academic affairs perspective is, and so, but understanding the class system or the rat line or some of those aspects of cadet life, when you're not a graduate and you've not had a lot of exposure to VMI, I would argue that perhaps it's on the candidate to do some research first before walking in the door. So
You answered the question I was gonna ask as a follow-on, which is there, either the academics, the athletics are somewhat fungible regardless of the nature of the institution in general. There are aspects of VMI's culture that are essential to what we're trying to do there that are unique, and so. I don't know if it's, what I'm trying to avoid is a gotcha question where you're basically asking someone who's not an alumnus to answer something that you wouldn't expect them to understand, not being an alumnus, and that counting against their evaluation as opposed to posed with this challenge, how would you approach this challenge within this culture? You know, to try and make it a little bit less of a, less of a sort of a trivia question.
yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And so I guess there's two aspects to that I'd underscore. One is, it's gonna be important for us in terms of how the questions are posed. Did we have that back and forth with Ken and team in mid-July? And they have talked about a structure, an outline for how to get this kind of conversation going. So that's number one. And then number two, I think it goes to Jamie's point as well about the sooner we can get the fodder for those themes and questions in and start polishing them up and maybe having somebody who's the designated asker for that theme, let's say, thinking about it and having the outputs that we're looking for built into the inputs that go in the question or series of questions, that the sooner we get that going, the more likely it is we're going to get the kind of information we want, because we pose the question in an open-ended but meaningful way.
It would seem those kind of questions that values, looking at compatibility of values and also thought process, how they think through things. That's what we're trying to get out of them, and as it relates to those things.
We'll take the time we need to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. And then I know y'all know there's a pretty good committee. We got a pretty good committee, pretty good folks on it. So I want to make sure that, we all feel comfortable and that we have the right approach to how we're going to ask these questions. But they're also interviewing us. So we want to make sure that we come across. Now, VMI ought to knock their socks off regardless of how we do, but we do want to make sure that we're professional and thorough and that we, come across in a way that would be impressive, that they would want to join the team. So I'm sure everybody's aware of that.
And that was my point, is what the last thing in the world we could afford. There's going to be one person who's going to prevail in this process and be selected to be the next superintendent. There are going to be a lot of other people, a smaller group, but they're going to be a group of very impressive, very important people who aren't going to make the final cut. And the worst in the world for VMI reputationally would be to have them walk away from the process feeling as if they were sandbagged by the interview or they were sandbagged by some gotcha question. What we'd ideally like to have is one person who's selected to be the superintendent and 5 other unofficial ambassadors that are going to go out into the general public and say, I didn't make the final cut, but boy, I was impressed by what they're doing there in Lexington. And I never knew much about VMI, especially with a non-alumnus. I never knew much about VMI before this meeting, but I'll tell you, that place is really great. That's what the ideal outcome would be for me, is that no one walks away from the process feeling as if they were treated unfairly, or that they come away and instead of generating goodwill, we generate ill will by virtue of the way we approach it.
And that is absolutely the point that Ken Carrick has made pretty much every time we've had a meeting. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay, so like I said, homework assignment is to start generating those types of themes and questions. Again, the position description is probably the first source document, but as Jamie said, we all come to this committee with different experiences and elements of the VMI experience, the VMI community. So we want to bring those to the fore. And the sooner you can get those into Jamie and I, the sooner we can start massaging those with Ken and the Buffkin Baker team. And again, we'll have a chance in mid-July when we're together in Richmond to really hone in on these, and not that they have to be final at that point, but we really want to have them, I think, worked up in such a way that while there's tweaking and back and forth communications between the mid-July and the 29th and 30th when we have the first round interviews, we're mostly down the road when we leave Richmond on the 15th.
So as far, in furtherance of that goal of sending the questions to you and Jamie, I guess this might be a question for Colonel Wyatt, right? If I'm communicating with two other members of the board by email, that triggers certain concerns under the Public Meetings Act, is that correct?
Correct.
It maybe what I would suggest is we either communicate all the questions to you, or we communicate all the questions to Jamie, and then you two can confer together.
Well, I'll go ahead and I'll be the spear catcher. So send them all to me, and then I can reach out to the committee members as well. I mean, there's no pride of authorship here, and also
Just to avoid an email triggering some kind of infraction under the public meetings rules, because there'd be three of us on the email contemporaneously, just.
Well, and the challenge would then be the back and forth. If you send questions, I don't think that's necessarily, and Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that's necessarily triggering.
No, that's fine. A single email to other board members is fine, but if you get into a situation where it then triggers a conversation via email back and forth, that could be considered a meeting.
so let's just go ahead and keep it simple. Send them. I'll be the single point of contact, and I can work with both the sender and other members of the committee if we need to amplify some things. And you know, we'll have communication back and forth so that this isn't all done in a vacuum. Okay. I think that is everything. Subject to any further questions, that's everything that we had. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, just one question. For the first round of interviews, they're all gonna be pretty thoroughly vetted, right? By Buffkin
Yes,
Baker.
yes.
So they'll be looking at not only credentials, but they'll be checking social media, they'll be checking financial background, those kind of things. That's all.
I don't know how much of that they will do before the first round or how much they'll do as we winnow the list down. But that's a great question that Jamie and I can bring up tomorrow.
I think you should, because the worst case scenario is we like somebody, and then we find out later on that they've been saying some crazy stuff out on the internet.
I do believe that's, part of their contract is doing all the background checks, the financials, social media, et cetera. At what point in the process?
I mean, I know that they will do it. The question is what point in the process.
Yeah,
So I'll cover that.
I would probably think it'd be finalists.
Really?
Yeah, I wouldn't think you'd wanna do it too early in the process, because the cost and expense of just doing background investigation is
I would
gonna
agree
be,
with that.
you'd want a universe that was smaller, and it's more to the point once they've made that first. They've jumped that first wicket, so to speak, and now they're in the final run of it, would make more sense, I think.
I think there are definitely some good gut checks though that they can do, and I would expect that they do before we even have them sitting in a room with us.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, presumably that's, I guess that was going to be my question, which is what, I'm not expecting that, like, for example, a social media check. I'm not capable of doing that, but people younger than me are very quick order, and you can find a lot of stuff. What should our expectations be about what we're being presented about the candidates at the July 15th meeting? And I'm asking that particularly with an eye as someone on the committee who a lot of alumni names I'm not going to recognize. I, might want to understand a little bit. Am I going to know the names being presented to us ahead of time, or are we being presented, given a package of materials, and making the decision about who makes the cut for interviews all in a single meeting?
That's a great question to ask, and I'll ask it tomorrow to get some precision around that. Alongside with how much of the for lack of a better term, background checking there is. I mean, certainly Buffkin Baker's got access to the usual suspects of resumes and LinkedIn and all those types of obvious professional qualifications. And a question that others have asked is how much of a read ahead will we have on individual candidates before we walk in the room? And I think that would be valuable to the extent that we can keep it appropriately confidential, because again, we're at a point where that information is not public domain. So I'll be fleshing that out, and I can get that answer back to you all hopefully before too long.
Not to overplay this issue, but I was impressed. One of the questions that was asked of me when I was being considered for the Board of Visitors by Governor Youngkin's team was, is there anything in your past that could potentially, if it surfaced after you're on the board, could potentially embarrass or compromise the integrity of the board or how the board or the governor are viewed? I thought that was a great question. And I would hope that that's a question that Buffkin Baker would ask before we have to sit down with them.
Okay.
So that the candidates have an expectation that those, and probably along those same lines that Buffkin Baker says, we will be, doing checks on social media, financial checks, other checks. It may help with the call process.
Okay. Other questions?
A question that I had was, do we know if there will be a opportunity for any of the candidates to provide a more of a vision plan or even a leave behind? I know sometimes during the interview process, someone may provide that along with the interview. And if that is provided, that would be good to read on the front end. I don't know if maybe Buffkin Baker is going to say no to that for all the candidates, but for instance, for when I was applying for the athletic director position, I did provide a leave behind that the committee could read. So I'm just curious, is that something that can be accepted or not?
It's a great question. I think it's a question. I think the answer may be, and I'm speculating here, what's required versus what is offered. And I would say if someone offers something, we would have no problem accepting it just to read it. But it's not a requirement necessarily. But I'll flesh that out with them tomorrow as well. It's another good one.
And that gives us a tremendous insight into their thinking on things as well.
Yes.
If they do provide something along those lines.
Okay. Other questions from the committee? All right, I'm gonna do this. I gotta get closer so I can read the list here, just to make sure we got everybody covered. General Stock, anything else from you, sir?
Sorry, looking for my button here. No, nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. Lloyd?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay. And now everything's moving around. Let's see, Laura?
I'm good. Everyone asked the questions I had.
Fantastic. Damon?
No, I'm fine. Sounds good what we discussed already, I believe.
Okay. Kate? Kate, you got anything else for the team? I'll come back to her. Let's see. Jamal, anything from your side?
Good, sir.
All right, Will?
Nothing for me. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Just make sure I've got that's what is that Kate? Kate, coming back to you. Anything else for the team?
Ernie, she shook her head no.
Okay, all right. I don't see the video here. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kate. Jamie, anything else for the team?
Hey, I'm here, Ernie. I got caught in here a little bit early. This is Terry. I'm good.
Yeah, that's
I'm
all
sorry,
I
sir, go
had.
ahead.
No, he said he's good. That's all I had to make sure that we asked the Admiral. Thank you very much, Ernie.
Okay, fantastic. Pat, anything from your side?
No, sir.
Lauren?
Good.
All right, thank you all. I think, we've covered everything and, we stand adjourned.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
you.
Rob Virginia
Take
Mill.
care.
Robert Virginia Mill.
Rob, Virginia Bell.